This is Gemara in Kiddushin Daf Yomi. We pick it up from Tes Amid Beis. We are 7 lines from the bottom of the learning for this month. The month of Elul has been generously sponsored as Chos Aliyas Neshama for Esther Rizal Basar Ameir B'Siyati Dishmaya. As the Kadosh Baruch Hu is closer to us, so too should our Torah bring Esther Rizal Basar Ameir higher in place in Gan Eden Shel Maila. We're holding 8 lines at the bottom. The first one in line is Minei Tarti. We pulled up a drop earlier as we're going back and forth and figuring out this machlekes between Rebbe and Rava. So according to Rava, the fact that the Rebbe learned out from Ubala, what does Rava do with that? Rava Da'amar. According to Rava, who says, Barahina Asvirali, Barahina, that was the person's name, explain to me, 1 second, there we go. Barhena Svera Li Kikach Ish Isho Bala says in the Torah, Kikach Ish Isho Bala. From here we learn out, Kiddushin Am certainly be Ave Kiddushin. From this pasuk says Rava, we learn out only a Kiddushin that could result in an act of intercourse is Kiddushin. But Kiddushin She'ein Masurin Leviyah is loy have kiddushin. Says the Gemara, Ma'ikla Neymar. What does this mean? What does Rava do with the other two halachas the Rebbe learns out from this pasuk of Ubala? So what does Rava do? Because Rava's learning Ubala teach us that there's a fundamental requirement in every kiddushin that has to be a kiddushin hamisur in Libya. Says the Gemara, Im kinechtiv kra oy ba'ala. My ubala shema min akulu, and from there Rava learns out all the different dinim. Now, how exactly Rava can learn out now 3 dinim from one word? Certainly not so simple, but that is the shita of Rava. Comes on the Gemara, and the Gemara says, according to Rabbi, v'Rebbe haybulas ba'al my avidlei. What does Rebbe do with the fact that the Torah says Bu'ulas Baal? He used it for the following. Baal oisa be'ula shaloi kedarka ve'in achar oisa be'ula shaloi kedarka. Halacha that we sort of began touching upon in the previous year, that there's a very fascinating detail regarding Bia shaloi kedarka, that with regard to creating a woman into a be'ula, even though the act of intercourse from the backside, of course, doesn't actually remove the besulim, but halachically it makes the woman into a ba'ula. Says the Gemara, but that's only if it's done through the husband. So this chiddush, this novelty that a bia shaloi kedarka makes the woman into a ba'ula is only via the husband. Ask the Gemara, 1 second. The Rebbe, hi svara. Does Rebbe really hold this svara? Tani we learned in a brayso. It's the brayso we quoted in the previous shir, a little bit higher in the Amid. 10 people slept with this girl and she's still a b'sula. What's the halacha? Kulam biskila. Rebbe Omer, no. Omer ani arisha biskila and kulam b'chanek. The rest of them are b'chanek. Why are the kulam b'chanek? Because Rebbe obviously is holding is after the first one was with her shaloi kedarka, that made her into a be'ula, and therefore anyone else that sleeps with this woman is going to get chanek and not skila. So says the Gemara, we clearly see that Rebbe holds that even a bia shaloi kedarka not done by the husband would as well render her a be'ula, and she would not be considered a besula anymore. Says the Gemara, as we turn over to Yoram and Aleph, Amar Rev Zeira Maida Rebbe Leinin Kinas. Rebbe admits with regard to Kinas, they call me Mishalmi, that they all play, meaning even though she's not really a be'ula, but halachically regarding the kinas that's going to have to be paid, Rebbe agrees she gets the status of a be'ula. 1 second, let's realize we did this backwards. We like to keep the page so that you can see Rashi. There you go, it's a little bit better. Let's just fix the sides of our paper. There we go. Continues the Gemara. 1 second. Let's understand this a bit deeper. Ma'ishna mikatala. Why is the kinas different than the act of katala, killing the person, whether they get skilo, whether they get chanek? How could we split the two? Explains the Gemara, shiny hasam. With regard to the death penalty, whether it's skilo, whether it's chanek, the Amar Kra says the Torah, who may sa ish asher shoichev ima levadoi, and the one that lies with her shall die. Says levadoi. That extra word levadoi teaches us that only that one person could be liable to the quintessential death penalty of skila, while everyone else is going to get the regular chanek. Whereas when it comes to the kinas, that's when Rebbe's in all this chiddush that the other people will still have to pay the kinas as if she was a besula. V'rabanan, hi levadoi my avdilei mi bayilei, that you need it for a different din. Lech l'tanya, as we're going to learn in Sanhedrin, umeisu gam shenei, says in the Torah, both of them should die. The man and the woman who were mizaneh, says that the Gemara, we learn out from here, Achu Shavin Ke'echad. The two have to be equal as one, that both of them are going to get the same punishment. Divrei Rav Hoshia. Rav Yonasan Omer, no. You learned it out from the Pasuk, Levadoi. So the Rabbanon are going to use the word Levadoi like Rav Yonasan used the word Levadoi. And not like Rebbe just darshan levadai to teach me with regard to the punishment of skila. Rav Yochanan, and wraps up this part of the Gemara. It's asked the Gemara of Rav Yochanan, Hi svara minale. Where does Rav Yochanan know this svara that only the act of bia via the husband that makes her a ba'ula ushaloi kedarka, but no one else? Explains the Gemara. Imkei nichtav kara, the pasuk should have said ba'ulas ish. If it just was referring to the act of sleeping together, should have said ba'ulas ish, the act of intercourse by a man. My ba'ula is a bow. Why that extra word that it was done by the husband? Says Rav Yochanan Shmami. No, that word teaches us tarti, this extra din that with regard to the bia shaloi kedarkai, it only renders her a be'ula if it's done specifically by the husband. Says the Gemara. Okay, so we learned in our Mishnah, Ha'isha Nignis, B'shleisha Derachim. We've dealt extensively with the sources of Eitz, Kesef, Shtar, and Bia. Now the Gemara goes a little bit deeper into this final way of Kinyan of a Bia. And asks the Gemara, Ibailahu, which part of the act of Bia is that which is the Kinyan? Ibailahu asks the Gemara, Tchilas Bia Koine, O Yisoif Bia Koine. Is it the beginning of the act of intercourse, or is it the soif act of intercourse? Now, what does it mean? And again, we're asking which part creates the Kiddushin. And there's a big machlokes. What is tchilas bia? What is soif bia? So now we touched upon in Yevamis. Usually tchilas bia refers to ha'ara, which is the aver inserting in, whether it means atara, whether it means nishika, meaning the aver just kissing, but that is tchilas bia. Says the Gemara, nafkamina, like we just explained, what's the nafkamina, which part is the kinyan? Kegain sheha'araba, that he performed the beginning of an act of bia, he did ha'ara, and then upashta yada, she went v'kibla kedusha me'acher, and he did not finish the act of bia. And before he finishes, whether he stopped after ara, whatever the story was, she goes and she accepts kedushin from someone else. Case number one. Inami, another nafkamina l'kayin gadol, the kakani bisula bebia. A kayin gadol that is making a kinyan on a bisula via bia. Is that going to be allowed What's the question going to be about a Kohen Gadol? So Rashi over here explains that the question is going to be im mutter. Look at Rashi in the third narrow line. Is it permissible for a Kohen Gadol a kadesh bibia? Is this third way of a kinyan to a woman of bia, which we're going to see soon, is not a preferred way anyways, but does it work? Is a Kohen Gadol allowed? What's the question? So Rashi explains, if you're going to tell me it's the beginning of the act of intercourse, then mutter, the Kohen Gadol could do it. But it's not going to work. Why? Very fascinating split we're making here. Because Nim says, the moment he goes into her a little bit, she gets the shame, the status of a be'ula, that she is a woman that doesn't have her besulim, or whatever that means. Shaloi l'shem Kiddushin. V'asir alei, and now the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to be together with her. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol has to marry a besula, d'chsev besula me'e'am of yikach. So it's going to be a fascinating detail, even though he's the one that did it. But if it's the Saif Bia, then his own act of the Tchilas Bia would invalidate him from continuing performing this act of acquisition. So what's the halacha? Amar Ameimer Mishmei de Rava, Kol ha-boyel daita al Gemara Bia, explains the Gemara that every act of intercourse is on the Gemara Bia, is on the completion, and that is the way that it's going to affect the Kiddushin, and it's going to come out that a Kohen Gadol is not going to be allowed to be married to via Bia. Continues the Gemara, the next level question within the Bia acting as the Kiddushin, asks the Gemara, Bia nisuin Isa, Irisin Isa. What does the act of Bia do? Is the act of Bia like all other acts of Erusin, Kesef and Shtar? And all it does is it affects Kesef and Shtar, it affects the Kiddushin, and of course, he'll have to perform an act of Nisuin afterwards. Or maybe the Bia is, by its very definition, a form of Nisuin as well. Explains the Gemara, Nafke Mino Yarshala Tamilo Lafer Nedarel. If you're going to tell me that the Bia is 2 for 1, it is the Erusin and it's as well the Nisuin, then Yarshom Tamlo Memer Nedarel. Then they're fully married after the act of intercourse, and he inherits her. He can become tummy to her, and he can annul her vows. However, then so when one could potentially get married through an act of Bia, what does that do? Amar Abaye, Tashem, I'll bring you a raya. About 7 lines from the white lines of Yuram and Aleph, says Abaye, Hav Zakeh Bebita, he says the Bryce, the father, he has the schus in his daughter, Bikdushel, and her Kedushin Bekasev Ishtaru Bebia, Vizakai, and as well he gets Bimsiyasa, anything that she finds, B'maisiyada, and her earnings, about Faras Nidarel, and he can annul her vows, B'mikabel Esgita, and he can accept her get, Vein Oichel Peiros B'chayel, Nises, and here's the critical ingredient, says the Braisa, that when she goes and does Nisuin, yes, Eralov Abal, the husband has an additional level on top of the husband, that what? She'oichel Peiros B'chayel, Katani Bia, so the Brisa began and said Bia v'Katani Nises. So what do we seemingly see, says the Gemara? We seemingly see that Bia is obviously not Nisuin if the Brisa continues and says Nises. Explains the Gemara, no, Kikatani Nises. Ashara is going the rest of the cases, but maybe Bia actually could be a Nisuin as well. Amar Rava tries to bring a raya Tashema on the first wide line. A girl that's 3 years old in one day could perform Kiddushin through intercourse. And if the Yavam sleeps with her, Kana he acquires her. and she makes tamei. If she was when she becomes an ida, she becomes anyone who touches her, anyone who sleeps with her becomes tamei. L'tamei mishkav tachtoin ke'elyoin. Ve'in this says l'koyin, and here it is. And if she marries a koyin, as we turn over to Yud Amud Aleph, she's allowed to eat truma. And if any of their relatives is together with her, maimsin al yada, they're going to get killed through her. And she's going to be pater. And if someone who's pasul sleeps with her, paslim and akuna, she becomes pasul from kuna. So that's the end of the brisa. So now articulates the Gemara, the exact same raya we saw a moment ago. What do we see in this brisa? Katani bia, the katani neses. The brisa listed two different cases. It began by listing bia and then it listed nisuin. So clearly bia does not perform nisuin. Answers the Gemara, no raya, the raya to Rava. Hachi kamar yinam and beis, 6 lines down. Ihani nisuin dikayin, if that which she did, the bia which was nisuin was to a kayin, then oicheles b'truma. But it's not necessarily a raya that the bia was as well nisuin. It just means explaining within the case of a kayin. So 2 potential rayas and both shut down. And now the Gemara continues, Tashima, a third raya, but this way it's going to be a raya the other way, that bia is only irisin and not nisuin. Says the Brisa, Kvar Shalach Yochanan ben Bagbag, Eitzel Rav Yehuda ben Meseira, L'Nitzivim. He sent it to Nitzivim, Shamati, I heard Alecha Shata Omer Arusa Bas Yisrael, that you say in Arusa Bas Yisrael, a regular girl that did irisin Eichals B'Tshuma. Shach lo your response. You don't agree that Arusa eats Truma? I thought that you knew all the areas of a Torah as a chazaka. You don't know how to say a simple kalva chaymer. Shivcha kinanis through an act of bia does not get to eat truma. Yet kasva machilas b'truma. Yet kaspa, when you purchase her with money, she eats truma. Zu, this woman, the wife of a kayin, shebiyasai machilas b'truma. That if they formed an act of bia, she does get truma. Einoi din shekasva machilasai b'truma. That's when he responded back. And if you know all of Torah, why don't you know this? What should I do? Shari Amra Torah, says the Torah. Shari Amra Chachamim Ein Arusa Bas Yisrael Ochels B'Truma Asher Tikanis L'Chopa. So even though Misavara, we would like to say that the Arusa Bas Yisrael indeed can eat Truma. However, I can't say it. So continues the Gemara. So Echi Dami, what is this case where the Bryce is listing an acquisition via kasef, an acquisition via bia. Even bia shayidei chopa. If somehow bia through a chopa, b'kasef shayidei chopa and kasef with a chopa. But tarvayo mechalach, and they're both exactly the same. They're both nisuin, and of course she can eat truma. The ella, what must the difference be? Explains the Gemara. But bia shayidei chopa, b'kasef shaloyidei chopa. But the problem with that is, this one is 2. It's bia and chopa. It's only 1, just kesef. Elalav bia shaloya yidei chopa, v'kesef shaloya yidei chopa. So it must be that there's an act of bia and an act of kesef that are both the same, both without a chopa. So now, amr bishlama. If you're going to tell me nisuin, I said the bia doesn't act in nisuin. Shamachi pashta pshita lei talim le bia mikasef. Then it would make sense that the bia is stronger than the kasef. Amr Kiddushin Isa Maishna Hacha de pshita lei Maishna Hacha de misafka lei. So explains the Gemara from the fact that we learn the two of them differently. It must be that, I think I said it wrong, this is the third raya, that the bia must be an act of nisuin as well. Because if the bia was only an act of erisin, we wouldn't be able to explain this brisa. And that, the Gemara thinks is a good raya, but says the Gemara, Amrav Nachman bar Yitzchak, no raya. Really, I'll tell you, with a chuppah, the kesef shaloy yidei chuppah. With kamrid, and you ask, that's not fair. The math doesn't equal up. If one is with chuppah, one is with now, one is two, and one is one. It's true the math doesn't equal up, but there is a kal v'chaymer. Kal v'chaymer isi v'hachi shalach le, and this is what he meant to say. Oma shivcha kinanis shein biyasa machilasa b'tshuma afilu al yedei chuppah. If someone marries a shivcha kinanis, even with chuppah and biyah, there's no truma. Yet, if you acquire a shivcha kinanis, kasa machilasa b'loi chuppah. Zu, the wife of the kohen, shebiyasa machals b'tshuma al yedei chuppah eina yedei shekasa machilasa b'tshuma sheloi yedei b'loi chuppah. Aval ma'aseh, what should I say? Amru chachamim ein arusa bas Yisrael lachals b'tshuma atikanis l'chuppah. So that, says the Gemara, is the answer to the raya. Mishum de'ula. But to wrap up loose ends, what does Ben Bagbag hold? Uben Bagbag gabi shivcha b'kananis lo yishayer b'kinyana hacha shayer b'kinyana. Says the Gemara, there's a fundamental difference. The shivcha kinanis, there's nothing left with the kinyan of the shivcha kinanis when you purchase her with kasef. She's a complete slave, whereas over here, there is something that is left over until they do nisuin. That is terrace number one. The Gemara is going to continue with Ravina tomorrow with another way showing how we don't have a raya from over here, and indeed the biyah does not actually perform the act of nisuin.